old for video games.
You have failed.
The same way, I will destroy you.
And my friend is truly dead.
Now this is pod racing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast. I am UrzaMaster. Joining me as always is Lord Uther and Jedi Master Psyllium Maas.
Hello there.
We welcome you to our adventures in the galaxy far, far away. I don't know, I had to try something new. Welcome, everybody. We are continuing our delve into Andor. This week, we're on the back half with episode 7, Announcement, which I have to say is an odd title. And it feels like busy. Like the whole episode to me felt very busy. Not in a bad way necessarily, but just a little different change of pace. And to bring us in, to give us a little background, maybe a little bit of the why this episode felt so different, I toss it over to Jedi Master Psyllium Maas using my Force Toss powers. Take it away.
Thank you, Jedi Master UrzaMaster. Thank you, Jedi Master Lord Uther. Thanks to all of our fans who have enjoyed us on the pending rebrand for our continuing Star Wars, Star Trek, NFL coverage. In fact, UrzaMaster, we recently picked up a fan that said very polite things about us regarding the Graying Jedi, and
We did.
And what was the name of that fan?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a call out from a fan here. Let me pull that up. That's going to be at Kbrick. Kbric. Kbrick, we appreciate you digging into our first episode on Andor, episode 8 of the Graying Jedi podcast. Really appreciate you engaging with us and giving us some of your thoughts. So, Master Psyllium Maas, I'd like to toss this over to you. KMBRI at Cambry. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Drop me a comment. Let me know. Like to point out that the biggest difference between Filoni and Gilroy is that Filoni seems to carry on the Lucas tradition of Star Wars fantasy. It's more fun, dedicated or directed to a younger audience. Gilroy is kind of giving us a pure science fiction Star Wars story, a little bit more like Star Trek, kind of bringing in some of the modern politico, some of the modern challenges of society, like the first scene with the 2 centuries. There's the comment that Andor had swum over. I like these thoughts. I think this is a very good perspective. I think it's very apt, and certainly as we've gotten deeper and deeper into Andor, I tend to agree. This feels a lot more like a Star Trek Star Wars story, which excites me as a big Trekkie. But definitely gives us a little pause about, the future direction of Star Wars. So, Psyllium Maas, what insights do you have into this new direction of writing and how it may compare to Filoni?
Well, as fans of the Graying Jedi know, we did cover Dave Filoni's stewardship along with Jon Favreau as to where they want to steer the larger Star Wars mythology. And that Filoni learned his lessons from the most experienced Jedi Master of them all at George Lucas's side while they developed the original animated series, Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So, yes, Filoni speaks as someone who wants to carry on the traditions that George started back in 1977. And wants to make sure that it embraces an all ages approach. You saw that with the animated shows that he worked on, Rebels and the Clone Wars, and you saw it with the live action Ahsoka, in which we tried to expand what is possible in a Star Wars story. Now, Mr. Gilroy and his company, they've expanded it further, but they've done so without having to, study at the knee of Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan and those that came before them. They instead are intent on telling a story about a galaxy in transition, under siege, and they are more focused on what individual moments of courage and cowardice look like, and trying to give the Empire perhaps a few more different shadings than just the standard binary. We will blow up this planet and crush the rebellion in one swift stroke. So, like I say, there's room in the playground for everybody. I don't know that we'll be seeing a ton more Andors as we've been enjoying them thus far, but we may see things that expand the Dave Filoni side of the street, going forward even further. Skeleton Crew, which is at this point rumored to be sort of the Star Wars take on a Steven Spielberg Amblin adventure. The Acolyte, which is set in a brand new timeline of Star Wars. And I say timeline meaning a singular timeline, but set thousands of years before the events we saw in The Phantom Menace and the Republic trilogy. So lots of exciting things to stay tuned in for. But like I say, you don't have to feel guilty for loving Andor and thinking, wow, but I also really liked Ahsoka. It's okay. It's all part of a galaxy far, far away. It's just, it's expanding the palette, the color palette, using new brushes and new inks and new shadings to give us a more complete picture. Yes, Lord.
Which leads me to a question, or maybe two, or maybe it's a question that splits into two questions. Anyway, does Kathleen Kennedy get the final say in anything Star Wars? And do they bring, let's start with that, because that might lead me to another question. So is it Kennedy who gets the final say? Or does she get the final say in anything Disney?
Okay, so in answer to the first part of that question, yes. She is the president of Lucasfilm, so anything, if it doesn't get through her desk, it's not getting on the air. However, Filoni and Favreau are acknowledged, whether by official title or otherwise, as sort of the leaders of the story group that is guiding this. Her relationship with Gilroy, which dates back to Rogue One, and we're going to discuss more of here shortly, that's just kind of a nice side hustle thing that they've worked on together. But Filoni, Favreau, okay. They basically, they're like the gatekeepers, and she's the final one on the throne that says we're in. Do
they still consult Lucas, or do they bring him in at any time? I feel like, and this is just an outsider's perspective who doesn't have as the youngins would say, the deets like you do, the details. Do they bring? I feel like they bring Lucas in as needed, or consult with him as needed. Or is he still kind of there in the background giving his advice, or do they go to him for advice? What's his role in this?
So,
or does he even have one anymore?
Yeah, to be perfectly blunt, as he has been since he sold Lucasfilm to Disney in 2012 for what now looks like a very reasonable $4 billion, considering the other grosses that it's made there. They also stopped to consider Disney CEO and friend of the program, Bob Iger, got Marvel for $4 million. And at last report, the Marvel properties had grossed $30 billion for Disney since their acquisition. That's billion with a B. The George Lucas, he famously gave it to Kathy, as she's referred to in the friendlier circles, because she had started off as a production assistant, on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and E.T. And I mean, she was with Spielberg and those guys, basically with Spielberg, for decades. And so she had worked with Lucas and ILM and all these guys, and she knew the ins and outs, and she can run a company and deal with post-production, pre-production, on-set stuff. He wanted to step far away from the headaches of trying to run a company and get this stuff off the ground. Now, Filoni, in the capacity of the Mandalorian, they've brought George to the set and introduced him to Grogu and shown him different things that they were doing and so forth. And I presume that if he thought they were straying too far away, he would have, nudged them and said, "Nah, I don't know if you guys should do that." And then I think Filoni respects him enough to take that advice or those notes. But no, he is not. Since Star Wars launched on Disney Plus, he has not had any active creative role per se. He's watching it just like we are, and discovering that Luke Skywalker is going to mow down a bunch of robots with his beautiful green lightsaber, just like the rest of us. So he gets surprised. He gets to see it as an audience member now as much as we do. So this is what you're seeing is the brainchilds of these showrunners and these producers and so forth, these writers, who are pushing forward there. So he's definitely just I'm retired.
He's like a retired Vito Corleone.
There you go. He just
kind of.
Right.
It's always perfect when I pull Italian references. So here, one more question, because I can't help myself. We'll get to Andor in a second, everybody. These are all, and this is the kind of stuff you can only get here at the Graying Jedi. So you should be clicking subscribe. You should be sharing us out to everyone you can, because this is where you get the in-depth, behind the scenes, the very peak of Star Wars conversation, which we'll get to that peak part in a second when it comes to web design. Did Lucas retain the rights to, or does he get a percentage? I don't know if you know this or not, of any of the merch that goes on out there, because that is really how he made his money when this all started, right? He retained the rights to the action figures and all that stuff. That was a pretty big deal, if I know my Star Wars George Lucas lore correctly. Do you know if he was able to hold on to that piece, or did he have to give that piece up too? Because I would think that would generate, whoever has that, a huge amount of revenue to do that.
I think in the spirit of goodwill, when they signed the sales agreement, he signed over, you couldn't tie one hand behind Disney's back, particularly since that's their bread and butter is, exit through the gift shop and check out all these great BB-8 sippy cups on your way out. So I think he doesn't retain an active financial stake, but what I think happens is, I think I read this when he created Star Tours, the ride for them, is he gets a pretty nice check at the end of each year, end of each quarter or whatever from them as a gesture of goodwill, but not because he's somehow, still got the ownership rights of that forth. Disney's running with that behemoth worldwide, and as you would expect them to be. That's part of why paying that's part of what they're paying the $4 billion for. And you have to remember, they bought it in 2012. The sequel trilogy launched on the big screen in 2015, and Disney Plus launched in November of 2019. Happy anniversary, Disney Plus. But when they bought it, it was a zombie property, only in that there was no new material being created. They were paying $4 billion for everything that had come before and the possibility of what would come next. And I think they've been more than pleased with their return on investment based on that. Make that same deal today with all of this other stuff, and it's not $4 billion. So that's the shrewdness of Disney CEO and friend of the show, Bob Iger, whom I'm about
especially when it comes
go ahead
to such an amazing series as Andor.
Indeed. And that's where we begin our adventures tonight with an announcement about announcement. Yes, episode 7 of Andor. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, I know how this game works now. We've just had the first 6 episodes of a 12-episode first season. And we've been conditioned to expect 3-episode arcs, 3 storylines with the same director and the same writer giving us a unified little mini story, and then we jump forward to a completely different point of view. And you'd be right. And now we're going to break the whole darn thing. Yes, there are 6 episodes to go. Yes, there are 2 directors left on the roster, one of whom we've already met. Yes, there are 2 more, there are 3 writers left whose work we can appreciate. 3, wait a minute. That math doesn't add up, Psyllium Maas. And that's where we come to how this show got started in the first place. So come back with me a little bit to the very, very foundation of Andor, and we'll explain how we got here. But Disney CEO and friend of the show, Bob Iger, announced in February of 2018 that there would be a Disney Plus streaming apparatus, and there would be several new projects under the Star Wars umbrella that would be exclusive to Disney Plus. One of them was a prequel to Rogue One, which had come out 2 years earlier and done $1 billion globally at the box office. And so they wanted to continue that success. So in 2018, they announced, at the time, they didn't have a title. They just had an idea for a show. And the idea for the show that would become Andor was very different when Iger announced it to investors in the spring of 2018. He proposed, or pitched, or Lucasfilm was on board with, a James Bond-like adventure show of the week featuring rebel intelligence, in which Cassian Andor, the rebel agent we first met in Rogue One, and his Imperial reprogrammed droid, K2SO, would go on a series of heists and rescues and assaults and so forth each week with gadgets and battle the Imperial forces on various worlds and so forth. It was going to be a completely different concept.
Not a bad idea, honestly.
And that was the original direction of this show. They hired a writer, producer, screenwriter, named Stephen Schiff. Now, Stephen Schiff, before he became a writer, he was a writer, but he was a journalist. And he worked for The New Yorker. He worked for Vanity Fair. Between 1987 and 1996, he was the NPR film critic for Fresh Air. He got his start as a screenwriter remaking Lolita with Jeremy Irons. He did a Clint Eastwood picture called True Crime in 2010. And unfortunately, he worked on the really, really awful sequel to Oliver Stone's Wall Street, Wall Street Money Never Sleeps. Now, the original Wall Street was a seminal picture in my upbringing and the subject of a future podcast, I'm sure. This one was terrible. So that was one strike against Mr. Schiff. But he redeemed himself by joining FX's The Americans, which was a show about Russian sleeper agents hiding out in Reagan's America in the 80s, working on missions to undercut the U.S., while not telling their grown children or their growing children that they were actually Russian spies. The kids thought they were just good old-fashioned apple pie Americans. And
hot dog eating Americans.
Indeed. That was an amazing show. And if you haven't had the opportunity yet, I suggest giving the first couple of episodes a spin and see how you like it. While Mr. Schiff was there as a writer-producer, during his tenure, the show won a Golden Globe. It won the prestigious Peabody Award, 2 WGA, Writers Guild of America Awards, Critics' Choice Awards, Television Critics Association Awards, the AFI Award, and Producers Guild Awards. It was nominated for 72 major awards and, in fact, won 23 of them. So Mr. Schiff was brought on to this Cassian Andor James Bond spin-off of Rogue One because of his espionage experience writing for the Americans. Now, they developed the show with Diego Luna, and they were going along on this path, and there was creative dissatisfaction with how it was going. It wasn't coming together. It wasn't meaningful enough. There was something lacking, as happens when you develop shows. And so in April of 2020, as the pandemic started to curl its iron fingers around the throat of the world, Kathleen Kennedy took a meeting with Tony Gilroy, ostensibly because of his experience with Rogue One and helping her salvage that into what they were able to achieve. Asked him, what would you suggest we do with this? And he read the scripts that they had, were proposing and the background of the series. And he said, I'd throw it all out. And instead he pitched what we now know is Andor. Now, was that self-serving of Mr. Gilroy? Did he take advantage of a situation where Lucasfilm was looking for, a fresh voice in the room? That's subject to conjecture. But what happened was he convinced Kathleen Kennedy that a show about radicalization and the various levels of people trying to live under domination and tyranny might be a better way to go. So out goes the James Bond idea. In comes what we now know as Andor. But I just read to you Mr. Schiff's accomplishments that, you don't want to burn all your bridges and say, sorry, you're out the door, Steve. What happened was he is still on the show. You'll note his name in the credits each week as a consulting producer, which means he got replaced as showrunner. He got replaced as head writer. Gilroy took those duties over and recrafted it. But in the case of episode 7 announcement, Mr. Schiff wrote the episode. It was his episode to write. He wrote it, and we're going to discuss it here in a moment. And that was his only contribution to the first season. I don't know if he'll be back for the final second season next year. So what that does is it screwed up our structure, right? So the director of announcement is Benjamin Caron. He's a British film and TV director. He had done Netflix's The Crown. He had done Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock Update. He also did a terrific Julianne Moore, Sebastian Stan, John Lithgow thriller earlier this year called Sharper, which you can find on Apple TV Plus if you have the ability to access that. A nasty little puzzle box of a movie in one of his features there, and it was really, really, really good. So he's a good director, and he directed episode 7 with Stephen Schiff being the writer. And then after this episode, on our next Graying Jedi, we're going to leave all that behind and start a brand new 3-episode arc like we're used to. Just one writer, one director. And then on episodes 11 and 12, at the end of this show of Andor, Benjamin Caron will return as a director. So he's going to do episode 7. He's going to take a brief vacation. He'll come back for 11 and 12, and then we'll all be caught up and rightfully there. So what's remarkable is after all of that I just described is how seamless episode 7 feels to any of the others that we've seen. Like, it doesn't feel like an outlier voice or, boy, that doesn't sound like something that was what happened in Andor. In fact, it casts the characters we've already been introduced to in some great new shades. Like, you almost say to yourself, I would have loved to see another couple from Mr. Schiff and see what he was going with. And that's where we kind of start, because the 2 or 3 characters that stand out the most in this episode are not named Cassian Andor, but we'll get to him soon enough. Mon Mothma, Cyril Karn, and Dedra are the 3 that really get to have the spotlight on them in their various storylines. And all 3 of them are just, again, it might send you chills. We'll start with Cyril, who is still struggling through breakfasts with mom. Now she's criticizing the cut of his suit and his high collar. And I love Cyril's, I love how he can be absolutely biting back to his mother while keeping a civil tongue. So, I mean, if you've seen the adolescent saying, leave me alone, mom, and turning their cereal bowl over and creating a thing, but he's just very, it's like his words are a dagger and it's his only defense against her. and she criticizes his high collar, and he says, "What is it you hear my collar saying? What message is my high collar sending?" And I just love that. I just love that he's willing to push back to a degree. Obviously, she is the dominant authority figure in that relationship, but you can tell that he is just eager to slip the leash and have his own freedom there. He gets a job thanks to the uncle, called in a favor, and it reminds you of Terry Gilliam's Brazil, just this soulless void, cubicle after cubicle, cube farm times infinity, and we get a glimpse of his work at the end of the episode, and it's just data entry with like just green formulas on the screen and so forth, and spend 8 to 10 hours staring at that over and over as you're inputting. I believe it was fuel standards. He was part of a fuel standards department. And, you see where workplace hostility comes to effect, because 5 minutes of that would probably drive all of us, mad. But for someone like Cyril, who's a brooding, we've already seen that he broods over Andor and blames him personally for his loss of stature. It's an incubator, we suspect, for future mischief or vengeance, because, so let's start with Cyril. I think we're going to do this episode by characters here. So let's start briefly with Cyril and what you guys thought of him, and then we'll jump to our other characters and see how we did.
We've talked about it so many times, but I think it's extremely important again. Him sitting at that fuel station or whatever, just inputting stuff, that's the depth that Andor is bringing to the move to Rogue One, and to me, A New Hope. We've talked about that so many times before. It's the people behind the scenes that are working the 9 to 5 or the 9 to 9 for the Empire that are making this whole thing possible. And to kind of see that, not that maybe realism is the wrong word, but I just think it adds depth to it. It gives it a little more meaning, because you never really, when I saw A New Hope, I never thought that Darth Vader needed someone sitting behind a screen looking at fuel output and input and putting in numbers and stuff like that, but guess he did to make his Star Destroyer move along. So, but again, I think it's also that piece of the mindless job that so many of us have experienced at some point in our life, but that is still critical to make something function properly, such as the Empire in this case. And I think it's another thing too, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but this director, Benjamin Caron, did I say his name right?
Yes, you did. You did. Okay.
He's going to do 11 and 12, which to me seem to be completely different types of episodes versus what this one is. And I think that speaks to, in my opinion, his talent, and also, in my opinion, what we always go back to as well is just the writing in general. Like, it's that good that he's gonna direct these two completely. And I know Master UrzaMaster versus, you haven't seen this whole thing yet, but it's amazing now to know that. I think that's such an important. This is one of the reasons why I love having Master Psyllium Maas on the show, is that getting this piece of information, I'm like, holy cow, this guy does 7 and then does 11 and 12, and they're completely different types of episodes. So that's a pretty cool thing to see too. Looks like you want to jump in on that.
I want to say to Jedi Master, UrzaMaster, do you like Cyril? You've had several episodes now to see him as the office guy that you don't want to have lunch with, and then now brought down to his soulless, soul crushing. Do you like him? What do you think of him?
It's interesting. He's painted as a sympathetic character, but he's radicalizing in kind of the, because we're so used to the light side and the dark side. He's radicalizing in the manner that a person leans heavier into the darkness, heavier into evil. Like he's driven by revenge. He's really the dark side without that name. He personally blames Cassian Andor for his downfall. He personally has a vendetta here that he's going to stew up some way to exact his revenge. He's just not sure what that may be yet. I don't like him.
Okay.
I want to like him at this point. I don't know where his character is going to go because, like you said, I haven't seen this all yet. But at this point, I see somebody who's brooding, who's stewing, he's going to be a Richard III. He's going to see himself prove the villain instead of like a Cassian who starts off in a pretty rough spot. I mean, easily could have been unlikable. Really, in some ways, was unlikable in the first episode or two, but has this sort of heart of gold. Whereas you get this pencil pushing, stiff upper lip kind of douche. And then you're like, well, they're probably going to make me feel bad for this guy because he's kind of getting kicked while he's down. But you realize he kind of has a heart of mud. Like he's just kind of a douche. Like it just gets worse. And the truth be told is like, and I'm sure we'll talk about this with Dedra too, is like you get these career people who are playing into the evil, but like a proper, Legion of Doom, they're all kind of at each other's throats too. To every Skeletor, there's going to be a Beastman, and Cyril strikes me as a Beastman.
Nice.
Well, it's self-serving, right? I think that's what makes him such a pud, is that we're the kind of people that, at least I know UrzaMaster Urza's and I have talked a lot about doing what's best for the organization, no matter what it means to us or how it affects us, because we believe that helps the organization grow, which helps us grow. And we see that like it's the complete opposite here. It's all about how can I boost myself up the ranks. I mean, that's how Cyril looks at it, but we know where he gets it from. We hear the conversation at the breakfast table, which makes you think how many, and we know it happens. These are real conversations that happen between mother and son, father and son, whatever it is. We know it's out there. And I think, again, to that idea of depth that I feel like this series or even just this episode adds, that's a very real thing. And who would have thunk that it was going to happen in the Star Wars universe, that a mother is going to browbeat this guy so much that he's going to become self-serving and wants to push himself up and undercut anyone in the way that he can.
Even when in the first shot of this episode, before he goes to breakfast, he's sitting in Coruscant. The artificial light and the suns are not quite up fully there, and he's sitting in this dimly lit bedroom with basically no adornments and so forth, and it feels worse than a prison, if you will. And yet he's allegedly home. So, all right, we'll stay on the bad guy's side for a minute, and then we're going to jump over to the good guy's side. So, Dedra, if Dedra was on the side of Rebel intelligence, we would think she's the most badass character that we've ever seen. At every point, she has spotted the what the rebels are up to. Never climbed the same fence twice. She thinks on her feet. She is not afraid to step on toes. When the big moment comes in this episode where she's basically put on the spot, if you're watching the Major, and if she faltered in any way, he was ready to slap her down, and whatever consequences came of that. But he listened. He kept an open ear, and she made a presentation and flipped the entire script on her devious co-worker, Blevin. In a moment where the Empire is in a little bit of turmoil, in the sense that they don't like getting caught with blue milk splashed all over them, and they want to punish somebody, anybody, everybody for what just happened on Aldhani. So again, it's fascinating. Dedra's on the team bad, and we're not supposed to like her, but she's, again, has agency, has intelligence, doesn't suffer fools lightly. And if she was on the good team, we'd be saying this is the best, female rebel character since Leia or Rey or anything like that. So again, it kind of makes you ambiguous. Do we like Dedra?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, probably for all the wrong reasons, but
sure.
I enjoy her as a character. I think she makes a great villain. And she's definitely got I don't know, there's some sort of an air about her, kind of like you really like Darth Vader, right? You know Darth Vader's evil. You know he's the bad guy. You know the horrible things he's done. But you really like him as a bad guy. Like I feel the same way about Dedra. Like she's got the number of the Rebel Alliance, or not even the Rebel Alliance at this point, but the Rebels. She seemed to have them kind of figured out. She's dialed in. She's clued in. Now, again, not having seen this entire season yet, I could easily see her being a secret rebel.
Ooh.
And that's the thing that, like, if that was the turn of the script in a very M. Night Shyamalan, I would be like, all right, that's a great twist. Like, that's way better than the aliens being allergic to water. I like that. That would be great. And the other thing is, if there is no twist, what an incredible villain. Like, to have a villain that just gets the best of the heroes, or the so-called heroes, it's a level of complexity we don't often get in American cinema, for sure. But we just don't often get, because we don't want to be confronted with the real life, right? Like, usually the people you kind of love to hate end up winning because they're just crappy, and that's just how life is. So I mean, it feels very real, and in a way, like, her ambition, there's something magnetic about it, and that's something that I really enjoy too, from a dark,
Yes.
sort of night of the soul perspective. And like, we talk about foils a lot, especially in Star Trek. I look at her like a con. You don't have to like somebody or approve of them to admire them. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of admire Dedra for her villainry. Like, that is, if you were going to be a bad person, that's the way to do it. Like, taking command and really seizing the moment, and asserting yourself. I mean, that's very attractive. Flip side to that is you get a Mon Mothma who's sort of blossoming into the total opposite of being the good guy, who's playing demure but looking to start to assert her underhanded kind of rebel spirit a bit. And that's equally, like, titillating from the perspective of a person taking the show, and like, ooh, you're getting somebody who's trying to make themselves appear useless and kind of like, more of an annoyance to the Empire, but underhandedly being this, like, rock of a champion out there. And I'm like, oh man, that's again, it goes back to great writing. It's great characterization.
The conversation, the extended 4 or 5 minute conversation she has with her former acquaintance from Chandrila, Kay Kelva, during the party, where they both want to tell each other the truth, but they don't know if they can trust each other to be trusted with the truth. And he starts it off first by saying, well, perhaps you'd find my politics a little strong for your tastes, knowing that they're standing in this glorious Coruscant penthouse surrounded by imperial functionaries and sympathizers. And he's just assuming that she's wedded to this privilege and position and power, and therefore would be sympathetic to Palpatine and his machinations. And she desperately wants to tell him, no, I'm on your side. I think, we have I need a favor from you. I need help in accessing these funds so we can help get these rebel cells, active and out in the field. But I love the writing in what they feel they are constrained, they can't say, and yet are still able to communicate. They never once come out and say, "Viva the rebellion." I mean, obviously, but they do so in such a way, with the clinking of cocktail glasses and the murmur of polite anecdotes and conversation. It's an extremely tense scene. And then her husband comes over to hover. I hope I'm not interrupting, and it's, he can't be trusted, that he's probably working with the Imperials. Such a fantastic moment. And I say this before, Mon Mothma, as presented to us prior to this show, was seen as a noble figurehead, somebody who bespoke virtue and freedom and all of that. And so it was very one-dimensional, not in a bad way, but just very one-dimensional. Let's put the statue of her outside the Senate. And here, this woman who is so conflicted with the family and with her role. And that leads me over to you guys with Luthen and Clea, who absolutely have a different approach as to what they want to accomplish with the rebellion. And Mon Mothma horrified to discover, was this you? Was this us? Did we do this? Did my money, create this crackdown? And Luthen shrugs and is like, yes. And she's like, well, look at what you've done. And he says, we needed this. We need them to overreact. We need to wake people up. They've been crushing us for so long. We've been asleep. He goes, we need them to, jack up prison sentences and, crack down on religious freedoms and freedom of assembly. And like, we need that in order for the rebellion to catch fire. And she wasn't ready or isn't ready to strike that match, right? Like it was just an amazing moment there. And then to have Luthen dispatch Clea to Val, who we now see outside of the Aldani forests and in a much more cosmopolitan setting, a great little, let's meet in the shadows. There's a dead drop basically. And, oh, by the way, the guy that just helped you get us all that money and get us off the ground, you need to kill him because he's got Luthen's head in his memory and we can't have that. I mean, there's no like, oh, well, he did a nice turn for us. Well, I guess there. I mean, he's a loose end and he needs to be eliminated. And there's absolutely no cost-benefit analysis necessary. And Val, it appears, that's what I'm going to have to do. And it's like, so talk with me about Mon Mothma and the rebellion now in this episode. Just great stuff.
Outstanding. I mean, this is the rebellion I've been waiting to see, honestly, is the the underhanded turn of character that it takes. Luthen, I think, is one of the most intriguing characters because he's he and Clea are the Che and Fidel. They're the ones who are going to make this revolution happen, get their hands dirty. People aren't going to like them. But you know what? The ultimate result is going to be 100% literacy rates and, a completely modernized, self-sufficient economy, which we do know that the Rebel Alliance does eventually win with the help of a Jedi and blah, 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 blah. And then the New Republic isn't so great. But like the way that this rebellion is forming is it's truly inspiring. But because it takes any good revolution takes people who are willing to cross those moral lines to get the job done. Like there is no such thing as a
nice rebellion. Yeah, I mean,
a nice rebellion, a morally, clean rebellion. Like that just doesn't happen. Even the Crusades, were bloody, horrible things, and really, as we know now with history, virtually pointless. But revolutions are like that. There are some that are actually pointless. And I think there's some argument, as we've seen with the New Republic and its fledgling, Ahsoka presentation, that there may be a segment or several segments, or if we're to trust the rumor mill on the internets about what Thrawn is going to knock over as a domino, could be multiple cells of people who are like, hey, you know what? The Empire was better than this nonsense. And again, we talk future Star Wars all the time. That is where your stories are. You don't need a Jedi to tell those stories. This is just the everyday folks. The only problem is some of these stories can, even though they're in a galaxy far, far away, can hit a little close to home for folks. It's a thin line you have to cover up with a lot of art to address some of these things. Unlike the film I mentioned, was it last time or the time before? And now I forget the name again. What do you do? But it presents. What's that?
Paradise Lost?
Street Fighter.
Oh,
Paradise Lost. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Paradise Lost, which fantastic Palestinian film. But it really hits you with some like real life crap that it's like, do I want to think about that? Like, do you want to see the good and the bad, or the bad and the good? That is art. That is complexity. And that's what the rebellion ultimately is, and every rebellion always is. There's a lot of good that can come from it, but there's a lot of bad that might have to happen to get you there for one reason or another. Whether you're justified in your freedom fighting or you're fighting an unjust cause, it works both ways. And it's the muddy water where the gold is.
Swing away, UrzaMaster, swing away. Anyway, that's my Signs reference for all of our pending rebrand fans out there.
What's a twist?
Yes. Oh, let's go back to Deidre.
Okay.
You respect her. You don't respect Cyril. And I think that makes a huge difference, right?
Right.
That's why we like her better. She demands the respect, but she acts the way that you need to act to demand the respect. Where Cyril is trying to make fake speeches and act like he knows what he's doing. There's a lot of respect. You earn a lot of respect by just being yourself, making your weaknesses, letting people know that you know your weaknesses, you know your strengths. That builds respect. Cyril just tries to be the guy who's over the top and can handle all these things, which I'm not saying he's a dumb guy. He just doesn't know how to get that respect from other people. I mean, even his captain of the guard or whatever was really kissing his rear end just because Cyril was in a higher position, not because he respected him.
Right.
Two different things,
Right.
easily.
Right.
Where Deidre is the one who actually goes out there and gets it. So I think that has something to do with it.
That's good.
We keep talking about how all of these stories can be told without a Jedi. I agree with that, but it just kind of hit me that it's your heroes or your leaders that kind of push you over the top and allow you to win, in a sense, right? It's them rising to that occasion, and can they do that to push you over and help you get there? So I agree that I like the stories that are told without Jedi. I mean, we see our first stormtroopers finally. I mean, let me rephrase that. We saw TIE fighter troopers, but we're seeing our first stormtroopers, and then we see a shore trooper at one point. So we went all this time enjoying the series, not seeing anything we were familiar with. Nothing. Which, again, it's fresh. It kind of reset myself as a Star Wars fan. I really don't, to your point, UrzaMaster, I always thought I needed to see a Jedi. And when I first heard about Andor coming out, I wasn't excited about it. Even though I liked Rogue One, I'm like, wait a second. Even Rogue One, when I heard about that, you still had like a Force-sensitive guy, at least, that was kind of out there in Rogue One. But really no Jedi or anything like that. So to be able to see the story, not seeing those common things that we grew up with, knowing Star Wars, is just another thing that I think pushes the series over the top. And I really think Andor's opening the doors for more series that we don't need to see a Jedi, because we know really their role is to push their cause over the top and to be that general or that leader that allows it to do so. One more thing that I have to say, because I can't help myself. I loved, there's this one part of the Timothy Zahn books that I absolutely loved. And it's when, who was Calibus? Not Calibus. What was the Jedi, the bad, or the clone? What was his name?
It was like
Kabath or something like that.
Right.
I remember him talking to, I think he was talking to Thrawn, or Thrawn was talking to someone about Kabath and said, the real reason why you need to have a Jedi like on a Star Destroyer is because he was mentally linking all the stormtroopers, like all the TIE fighter troopers together to allow them to fight more efficiently. That was one of his roles. And I found that very interesting, that it wasn't that you needed the guy to wield a lightsaber and chop up a bunch of rebels. You needed him on the bridge of the Star Destroyer to mentally use the Force to coordinate everything. And I just thought that was a really cool spin that made sense, that it might be something that you need. And he even said, like, that was something that pushed the Empire over the top, was that they had someone that could do that. And that was kind of what he was trying to use Kabath for, again, was to do something like that.
Right.
All right, I'm done.
Well, we would be derelict if we didn't mention Cassian Andor in a show called Andor. And this this Andor that we see, think about how the heroics of Aldhani and how he started to trust as a group, and that was betrayed by Skeen and so forth. He's regressed, right? When we see Andor in this episode, episode 7, he's back to the guy we met on episode 1. He's a little scheming. He wants to run away from it all. I've got enough credits, Marva. I'll take you and B2 EMO, and we're going to get out of here, and we'll go someplace the Empire hasn't ruined it. He even kind of makes a sly pitch to Bix, who's still in mourning over the murder of Tim. And you see, this is the guy, this is the sort of weaselly personality that he spent most of his life after being, taken from Kasari. This is who he was. And he has not read the manifesto. He has not taken on the lessons that he just learned at Aldhani and so forth. He's actually regressed. And it's really sad, right? Because he comes back to Ferrix, and it's nice to see those characters from the first arc, back in there, Marva and B2 and Bix. And they all reject him, right? Marva says, I'm not going anywhere. The raid on Aldhani that she has no idea that he is a part of, goes, that inspired me. I want to fight. I want to say no. I want to stand up. So he's inadvertently lit the fire in Marva and can't possibly, come clean with what he is. He tries to shake it off. It was just a robbery. She's like, no, it was something else. It was an announcement. It was a call. And Bix, she wants nothing to do with him. Like, even if there had been some simmering sparks over time and he tries to, restart them, saying, remember when your father kicked me out of the front yard, et cetera, et cetera. She's just like, go. She's like, you brought this, the Empire to this planet. They're not going to leave now. They're crushing the citizenry. That's your fault, Cass. I'm glad for you. I'm happy that you're in a good place now, you think. Just go. Just leave me. And so it was interesting. I don't think he expected to be rejected. And you could hear that mournfulness in B2 EMO. I just I thought we were going, or she won't let us pass.
Just heart crushing.
Right. But he basically, Marva says, he says, like, I'll never stop worrying about you. And she goes, well, that's love. And she says, I can't leave and you can't stay. So, and she kind of like dismisses him. Like, I think she thinks he stole the money. I mean, I got lucky, and she's like, I'm happy for you, Cass. Just go and live your life. You had such trauma growing up. And we see that the quote adopted father, Marva's companion, who helped get him off of Kasari, was hung in the streets during a protest that he was not even really a part of. He was actually trying to calm the crowd down. Someone threw rocks into the clone troopers. They turned around, and the next thing you know, it's Clem who is getting punished there. Which leads us to, man, what an ending in terms of here, because now we get basically the Miami Vice meets Star Wars on the planet Niamos. Beachfront community, club techno music, looks like a pleasure worker or just somebody that he hooked up with, sharing time in the shower and can you go get me some breakfast? And he happens to be at the very wrong place at a very wrong time. And all of your worst fears about law enforcement come true when the shore trooper, literally no apparent reason, just because he feels like he wants to hassle him. So why are you running? Why are you out of breath? Why are you in this place? I'm just going over here to get some groceries. No, you stay right there. I'm not done with you. We get a cameo from a droid that may not be K2SO, but it sure is a nice little foreshadowing of that relationship to come. And then as a result of his Aldhani raid, he inadvertently created massive new draconian punishments for simple crimes. And you saw what happens to him, and he's sentenced without a blink to 6 years hard time, without having been able to tell a soul that he's even been picked up off the street. I mean, the woman waiting for her breakfast is going to be waiting a while. Marva and Bix have no idea what's going on, where he is. The only thing that probably is good is it might keep Luthen and Clea off of his back for a little bit. But man, talk about Andor sort of reverting to selfishness and then getting, a really dark karmic payback here at the end.
I'm actually going to take his side in this one when he's talking to Marva, because we see him go from being selfish to finally opening himself up and sacrificing for people, and then he goes back to that instinct that everyone is bad, right? When he's on the planet and he felt for that kid who got injured and was getting operated on, and then this guy's like, hey, let's just split the dough and get out of here. And you could almost see it like, or feel where he's like, it doesn't matter if I try and be good or not. This is the result every time. So I'm just going to shoot this guy. I might as well go back to what I know, because it doesn't matter. And so I'm going to give him leeway on that one, because he had to. It's almost like he had to revert back to himself. Not that he had a choice, or that, his conclusion is this is how all people are. Rebellion or no rebellion, book or no book, cause or no cause. This is the root of people. And so let me just take my piece and get out of here.
Is that not the Force? It surrounds us. It penetrates us. It flows through us. It guides us to good or bad. This is the karmic comeuppance for him not joining the rebellion full bore. He goes off. He may have some time to where he's like, oh, finally, I've made it. I'm living the life I should live, or, in hiding in a way I should be. And then zap, instantly, it comes back to bite him. And that's the ebb and flow of the Force, is it not? It's kind of the beauty of this show, is that without Jedi, without Sith, without, super good, super bad guys, you get that real life kind of, look, stuff happens. And sometimes that stuff happens in such a manner that it pushes you in the direction that ultimately you're probably going to go. And I definitely felt in that moment as he's getting sentenced, he's like, oh, he's kind of like, uh-oh, how am I going to get out of this? But at the same time, he's like, oh man, it seems hopeless. But this whole show so far has been pushing us to radicalization. What better way to radicalize somebody who's resisting radicalization than the draconian wake up that Luthen is calling for? And it's this beautiful synchronicity that you just know that ultimately Luthen is right. You don't want to accept the fact that he's right, but the dude's right. This is what has to happen. And for Andor specifically, this has to happen for him to transform into who he needs to be to have Rogue One happen.
Right. Absolutely. So like I say, it's infuriating. I think this guy right before Andor gets like 6 months for I think that they said littering or something. I mean, it was just, and they talk about it in the white sterile ISB meeting as if, from now on prison sentences will be quadrupled and, this and that and the other. And it sounds like, data points on a meeting checklist, but then you see it in practice and, it's just, it's like an assembly line. All right, next suspect. All right, get him off the streets. Next suspect. So, and then I think she says to him when he's like, well, you've got me all wrong. I didn't do anything. We'll take it up with the Emperor, next. And so that was just fantastic there. You mentioned the stormtroopers and the shore troopers and the Imperial droids there. Also the mouse droids. It was nice to see a mouse droid skirting along there when Cyril was being given the grand tour. So again, we're only going to get this one slice of Mr. Schiff, but I don't think he in any way dishonored or brought disreputable reputation to this show. I think even if he only gets one chance, I think he more than fulfilled it. and was able to, I mean, look at what we just discussed. 5, 6, 7 characters all getting their voice, their chance to shine, their chance to evolve and grow. And again, that's good stuff. So are we ready?
That brings us to our Graying Jedi recurring rating segment, where we light up the kyber crystals and bestow the colors of our lightsabers upon the episode we are discussing. For episode 7 announcement, Lord Uther, what kyber crystal is fit to your lightsaber?
That's a bad one I have there. I'm going to go Christmas tree evergreen
Nice.
green. Beautiful, look, spoiler alert, we're going green the rest of the way here for me, because that's what I mean. I obviously know what's going to happen here with the series, and maybe the shades of green are going to differ depending on what the episode is. But again, without a doubt, just another great episode that keeps you wrapped in what we're seeing. Like there's no point in this episode where you're like, why, right? And we've talked a lot too about you only have so much time and you can't waste that time. And every word has some meaning behind it or purpose behind it. Every scene does. And here we go again with another episode that every single thing that's said and happened matters. And so to me, that gets a Christmas tree green.
Outstanding.
Master Psyllium Maas?
Well, having grown up during my formative years with Master Lord Uther, he knows that I often wear my heart on my sleeves. And in this case, I wear my kyber crystal on my sleeves, and we're going San Francisco Dawn green for this episode. The USF Dawns. So that is that is what Mr. Schiff deserves. And that is what this episode should get for all the reasons discussed prior to it. So there it is. The sleeves of green.
And it makes me think of our former basketball coach, Don McGee. So that makes it even better for all of our Glenbard West fans out there that subscribe to Pending Rebrand in the Warp Core and the Graying Jedi podcast.
And I'm going to go with a Major Blood background green.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
I found this to be an excellent episode, albeit busy, but it was busy in the way that held my attention and gave me a lot of juicy characters to bite into, including some very strong personalities that often can muddy the waters in a show. But these were not, they didn't dilute, and they weren't so concentrated they turned me off. They were just enough of a bite of each. I was like, oh, this is crafting something exceptional, truly exceptional. That's deepening Star Wars to me in a way that only Star Trek has ever done before. So with that, we, the Council of Graying Jedi, have crossed over into the back half of Andor. We look forward to the next rides we'll be going on with Cassian Andor et al. But to you all out there who are looking, seeking, hoping to reach the pinnacle of that next step in your business venture, food truck, Jedi Council, perhaps, Master Lord Uther, how would you find that peak you referenced earlier?
Oh, well, there's only one place I would go. And of course, I would contact Michelle at Peak Media for all of my business, web design, business consulting, social media, you name it. We get the peak of all those things at Peak Media. That's where I would go.
That's PEAKMDS.co. And yes, Peak Media, our website coming soon, where you can find the Graying Jedi, the Warp Core podcast, Cut the Cheese, Poke the Bear, Melt Off podcast, and all of our ongoing content that you subscribe to. And if you don't, you absolutely should hit that subscribe button, click that notification button next to it, and make sure you're up to date on all things pending rebrand. You've come to the galaxy far, far away. Now you must go back to the galaxy nearby. And may the Force be with you.
And also with us.
Always.